The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. This is a long mail, so we're going to get right to it. It says, Dear Perch, I was listening to some of your older videos, we call that Perch Classic, when you said comics being a visual medium were sold more on the art than the writing. And I totally agree. Of course, a good writer is crucial, but it's the art that grabs your attention first and potentially pulls you in. The art is what makes a comic unique, and here is the proof. Take any comic, open it to a random comic page, and visually try removing all of the text from the page, leaving only the art. You would still have a comic book. The story would certainly lack detail, but if the artist did their job correctly, you could still follow the story through the sequence of panels. Now do the opposite. Imagine removing all of the art, leaving only the text. You no longer have a comic book, just words on a page without the art. Word balloons and thought bubbles are rendered useless. Yeah, it's pretty good. I like that. That's good. Nice, simple way to describe a concept. When I first got into comics in 1989, it was the art that got me hooked. Just a year later, when I saw art from Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, and Jim Lee, I became a super fan. Naturally, I followed them over to Image Comics in 92, and the art is what kept me as a fan. During the 90s comic boom period, the art took precedent, I'll admit at times too much, and the stories did suffer. On the retail side of this, I worked at two different comic shops from 2001 to 2008. When Frank Miller and Jim Lee did All-Star Batman and Robin, it was unanimously shit on by our customers, calling it the worst Batman comic ever. Despite that, and despite all the delays the comic encountered, we always sold out of it, every single issue. That is true. In 2005, Rob Liefeld drew 2 issues of Teen Titans, and I had to convince the owner of the shop to increase our orders, which thankfully he did. I remember customers coming in and laughing at how bad the art was. Even with a bump in orders, we sold out of those 2 issues. I guess liking Rob Liefeld is one of those things you don't admit public. Yeah, that's funny. That's kind of true. A lot of it's changing a little bit lately, but for a long time, like nobody would admit liking Rob Liefeld. Like that guy can't even draw feet, and people wouldn't. But at the same time, I had the same experience. I sold out of a lot of Rob Liefeld books, for sure. You know, I always said this. I said this once to Rob Liefeld, and he liked it and chuckled, and I think got a big, I don't know, he liked the comment. But it was basically like you could shit all over Rob Liefeld all you want. Rob Liefeld still paid for the rent on my shop for many a month. So I whether I like how he draws feet or I don't, he kept me in business alone. There are a couple artists that did that. Todd certainly did that. Rob did it. Jim Lee did it. Really, from our perspective, those 3 guys. Everything else was story-based, but those 3, uniquely, Rob, Jim, and Todd, they paid the rent, the full rent. Anyway, after decades with emphasis on the artist, in which comic sales soared, why are we now in a place where the writer takes precedent and sales are down? Some of the hardest artists right now, such as J. Cott Campbell and Mark Brooks, are relegated to variant covers, especially retail incentive covers. I know covers pay more than pages, but page rate's gotten that shitty? Yes. And it proves my point even further that a hot artist can sell a comic. But now it's just the cover. In the 90s, when art was the appeal, people are at least reading the comic. Whereas today, I'll bet most people buying those variants are not even opening the comic. They're sending it to CGC in hopes of getting that 9.8 and reselling it or just displaying it because they like the artwork. I mean, the publishers are basically they're fully playing to the collectors of the collector market, who, as you say, are just buying this shit and putting it in slabbing it and calling it a day. And that's a completely different business model and a completely different business approach. I think it's a terrible one. And I think it's self-destructive, and I think we're seeing that destruction now, but that is absolutely the game they're playing. As for the rest, I mean, yeah, I think why are the writers taking precedent? Well, the first reason, I think you're about to get into the next paragraph, is that basically the image revolution where the artist took their ball and went somewhere else infuriated Marvel. They basically corrected by putting the writer at the center of things. And then I think, writers are more scalable. Writers can do multiple comics. Artists can't. And so it's a way to kind of invest in a different name, at the company that allows the publisher to milk more cash out of them, fundamentally. Anyway, let's go to your mail. I think you have the same theory as me. So I have a theory, and I'd like to know what you think. I believe Marvel and DC, especially Marvel, still harbor a grudge over the image revolution of the early 90s, and they don't want any artist to get an ego and try and shake up the industry like that again. The Image founders really did something that has not been done in the last 30 years since then. They were able to knock DC out of the number 2 spot and into 3rd place, and while they didn't quite knock Marvel out of the top spot, they did take them down a few notches. If it wasn't for X-Men franchise, maybe they would have taken the top spot. They absolutely would have. And I want to emphasize, these were artists that did this. Logically, I would ask, why is there no concern about an group of egotistical writers, of which there are plenty of today, starting their own company to challenge the big two? Simply put, you're 100% right here. They can't. A writer can't pick up the pencil and start drawing their own comic. An artist can write their own comic. Whether that story is good or not is debatable, but it can be done, and it has been done successfully by many, not just an Image. You're 100% right, by the way. The funny thing, and a lot of people don't like to admit it, is a well-written story with shitty art does not move. A absolutely beautiful-looking book, great art, with a shitty story, moves. It is a visual medium. And I think the publishers know this, so I think part of why they highlight the writers is, quite frankly, are trying to make money off somebody that can write multiple books for them, costs less, quite frankly. And they feel like as less, they have more control over those people. I mean, look, Donny Cates was the hottest thing in Marvel, and Donny Cates, of course, has the kind of the massive personal issues he's had, and he did Vanish. Vanish wasn't a bad comic, didn't sell for shit, not really. When I say that, that's unfair. It sold some copies, but nowhere close to what he was selling at Marvel, and Marvel knows this. The writers have very little leverage when all is said and done. And if you had taken that Vanish comic and instead of Ryan Stegman, you just had kind of some unknown writer or artist, it wouldn't have sold much at all. And I know this because Donny Cates, at the height of his popularity, was doing indie stuff that wasn't selling for shit. So, anyway, let's finish up this mail. It says, what do you think, Perch? Does the comic industry have a kind of PTSD from the Image revolution of 30 years ago? Agree, disagree, or do you have your own theory? Totally agree. I apologize for this question turning into an essay, but I would absolutely love to hear your take on this. Thank you. Hope you and your family are well. Thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate you, as they say in Texas. Anyway, you're absolutely right. And I'll give you another reason why I know you're right. The lore of the Image revolution still haunts Marvel to this day. And every now and then I talk to various people. There's a young editor at Marvel I talk to fairly regularly. And she's nice, and she actually is pretty reasonable. And we chat about a vast number of things. And she hooks me up with books, which is always nice early. And she comes out of the woodwork one day. I did a video about this a long time ago, going, "Man, that Rob Liefeld, fuck that guy." And I'm like, why fuck Rob Liefeld? I mean, he sells books. It's like, yeah, but he betrayed us. He betrayed our company. And I go, yeah, I mean, I guess. I mean, not really, because he was a freelancer. He wasn't a full-time employee, and he did his own gig. I don't think that's betrayal. That's called, if you wanted to keep it, put a ring on it. I mean, if you really wanted Rob Liefeld to stick with you, you sign him to an exclusive. You keep him. But he was a freelancer, so he went and did what he wants. And she's like, he owed Marvel. Marvel made him. And keep in mind, as somebody who's very reasonable, I like, have completely reasonable takes. But you're like, he betrayed us. He betrayed us. He betrayed the people who built him. And I go, hang on a second. You're 24. You were born in 99. You were not born. You were an idea when Rob Liefeld, he betrayed us. You weren't born. But the striking part to me was the lore of this Rob Liefeld asshole who betrayed Marvel is so embedded in the culture of Marvel. The Image revolution is so much on their minds. And here's somebody who wasn't even born, who's working at Marvel, hasn't worked there too long, who's just basically getting, has his grudge that's been carried over from people. But she wasn't even born. Wasn't born for like, what, 6 years in Liefeld left. That's hilarious if you think about it. But anyway, yes, absolutely, it's true. There is a grudge, for sure. It is one of the reasons. And Marvel still to this day will say things like, we got to be careful about the artists, leaving. Like, we build them up and they leave. I mean, the sad part is that ship is that ship has long since sailed. And even though you had things like Bendis up and leave Marvel to go to DC and completely bomb there, the point is proven. Artists have way more leverage than writers, and the publishers know it. If the artist leaves, they've got a number of avenues, if they're good, to get their books out there and continue with their name. If it's a writer, it's much harder. As we saw, frankly, even Bendis, who was a superstar writer for Marvel, like one of their biggest writers, goes over to DC and just kind of bombs. I mean, he does not move the needle at DC. And there's probably no safer bet. If you think about the big two at the moment of Bendis, moving over, that should have been a home run, but it wasn't. I guarantee you, though, if it was an equivalent artist, absolutely that would have worked. Anyway, good topic. I'm curious to hear what people in the comments want to say about this, so let's hear it. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? Let me know in the comments below. And yes, thanks for listening.